The Wes Penra Papers. A Journey Through the Multiverse. The Second Level of Learning. http://wespenry.com. Part 3, Interdimensional Manipulation in Present Time. Present Time Paper Number 1, the year 2012. Looking Forward, a deep dive into current ET situation, Part I, by Wes Penra, Monday, September 24, 2012, http://wespenry.com, Part 1. Just look at us. Everything is backwards, everything is upside down. Doctors destroy health, lawyers destroy justice, universities destroy knowledge, governments destroy freedom, the major media destroy information, and religions destroy spirituality. Michael Elner. 1. Billions of star beings in near-Earth space. There are remnants of the gods everywhere on this planet. Earth is like an open book, telling any star race who is visiting us in the present about our past. ETs don't even need to land on our planet to find out. There are structures everywhere that the gods intentionally left as landmarks. Still, most of us humans are too blind to see them, and when we do see them, we brush them off as something they obviously are not. And most of the scientific community is not very helpful in that respect, either. It's not only all the pyramids, spread out all over the world, which are obvious, but there are also ruins and remnants of old giant structures, like the statues on the Easter Island, the Nazca Lines, Stonehenge, and lots of other abandoned monuments and artifacts. What is not as obvious to people who are not aware of them are the carved-out faces and body structures of the gods, which sometimes depict them as they really looked like on their home planets, so that visitors will recognize them. Many people who see those carved-out figures brush them off as made by nature, such as weather and wind. Lots of people can't even see that there are any structures in the first place. It's a matter of awareness and consciousness, just like the American natives couldn't see the European ships when they approached the shore back in the 1400 to 1500s, they simply had no images in their collective mind of such ships sailing the oceans. Those who say there is nothing there to see will probably see them in due time, once their awareness increases. I've experienced the same thing myself. What I couldn't see 15 years ago, I can clearly see now, as obvious as anything. All these artifacts that star visitors can see from the sky indicate to them whom they may have to deal with if they decide to settle on Earth. Of all these artifacts, the pyramids are probably the most obvious. All the visitors need to do is to figure out towards which star, or stars, a certain pyramid is pointing. And while we're on the subject, there is one important comment I need to make regarding the Great Pyramid of Giza. We have been taught that the largest chamber inside the pyramid is the King's Chamber, which is pointing towards Orion, while the smaller chamber is the Queen's Chamber, pointing towards Sirius. In fact, it's the other way around. The King's Chamber is that of the king who married the Orion Queen, and he is the Queen's minion, not the other way around, as we have learned here in the second level of learning. Therefore, naturally, the smaller chamber is the King's Chamber, pointing towards Sirius, while the larger one belongs to the Queen of the Stars, pointing towards Orion. Do I need to say who's been teaching us the opposite? Everything is backwards, everything is upside down, like author Michael Elner says in the quote which opens this paper. The Syrian overlords, the instigators of the patriarchal regime, would find it very insulting to have to admit to that their king is a minion of the queen. In fact, it's a matter of perception. In my mind, there are no minions, there is no competition. We are all on our own spiritual path. Here is a good motto, in my opinion, coined by the Pleiadians: create whatever you want as long as you don't do harm to self and others. Readers who were unfamiliar with what I've exposed in these papers and read all about how much alien activity there was in ancient times, and how the gods interacted with us humans, may sit back and think, where are these star races now? Why don't we see and interact with them in the present? These are good questions, and here are the answers. The star races out there don't count time like we do, and if they leave, they may be gone for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years, but from their perspective they just took a nap. This, of course, is just an analog so we can understand how they perceive time, but they will return, and they will return soon. I am of course talking about the Syrian overlords now. They never really left, as a skeleton crew remained here under the supervision of Marduk, Ea's son. They have ever since been working behind the scenes of governments and high officials in different fields of society. One could say that Marduk walked in his father's footsteps and built upon Ea's idea of an invisible shadow government. More often than not, these star beings have been overseeing their experiment, us, from other dimensions, away from our, and therefore been among us, but not always in 3D. Albeit, some of them have, some of the time. Now in particular, when we're living in the nanosecond, which end in 2012, some Syrians who remained here have taken human bodies again and work within our governments and global institutions, such as the United Nations, G8, International Monetary Fund, and other institutions where big decisions, from their standpoint, need to be made. You may see these star beings in human bodies being interviewed on television, or holding a speech, and you would never know that they are not human. Here in the United States, I would keep an extra eye on Zbigniew Brzezinski, George Bush Sr., Henry Kissinger, and David Rockefeller, to name a few. There are of course others. However, don't fall for the fake alien pictures of Brzezinski and Kissinger circulating on the internet. They are just bad Photoshop work. They are alien enough as it is, without having to Photoshop them. However, there are more star races here than just the Syrians. In fact, there are billions of them, mostly non-physicals, who are hovering around Earth right now, monitoring what is going on. The majority of them are friendly and don't want to interfere with our progress, following universal laws, but are more than willing to guide us if we ask for help. Others are just spectators and don't interact at all, while a few are not so nice and are ill-intended from our way of seeing it. In other words, there is a huge mix of non-physicals who found Earth in our time once we made our presence known with the drop of the atom bombs in the 1940s. Still none, or a very few of these non-physicals, are interfering with us humans on a daily basis, except there are those who every now and then try to snatch a body when you are entering a fetus, hoping that they will get a chance to experience the nanosecond down here in the material world, because here the energies are strong and the learning curve high. Some of these billions of souls would actually want a body here, hoping to get a free ride through the nano. People don't know that there are billions of souls who have stood in line to get a body here during these end times, when time itself speeds up and those down here have a chance, in spite of the hardships, to learn a lot that they can't learn in the astral, where they don't have a body. This doesn't by any means justify what the Syrians have done and are doing, because what we experience now in form of enlightenment should have been experienced without the negative interference and manipulation from certain alien species. There is one thing, among other things, that is speaking in our favor right now. Those of us who have managed to inhabit a human body during the nanosecond, approximately between 19872012, must consider ourselves fortunate despite the hard lessons we have to learn. During this time period, time has sped up 100,000-fold. I am sure the reader has experienced this as well. If you think back 30-40 years, you will notice that your life was much slower and more stable in general. A year seemed longer than it does now, and when things happened, there was a longer time period between the events. Now, everything happens at once on an ongoing daily basis. We have been used to speeding up tremendously to keep up with life and things we have to accomplish. The weeks, months, and years fly by, and we hardly even have time to reflect over where those years went. In general, there is not much time for real reflection, because the energies are so busy. Good for you if you have been able to slow down in spite of the speed around you, because that's exactly what we all need to do, and what I have stressed so many times, especially in level I. If we don't, it may have an adverse effect on our nervous system, and we may have some body symptoms that the doctors will have a hard time diagnosing correctly. Others, who have not prepared themselves at all, may go insane, and the suicide rate is accelerating. Soon, however, time will slow down again. It's like a locomotive which has accelerated for 25 years and reached an incredible speed and now has to slowly decrease it, because if the driver stands on the brakes, the train will go off rails. Same thing with an airplane, it needs a landing strip to slow down. It can't just stop from one second to another. This is what will happen in 2013 and a few years onward. Time will slow down incrementally, and we get a chance to reflect over what we've learned through the nanosecond. Those of us who have taken advantage of the alignment with the galactic center and the increased encoded information carried on gamma rays, hitting our bodies over this last 25 years time period, will not regret what we have learned. It has been a very tough ride for many of us, and it's not always been a love and light adventure. We have often had to dive into the darker aspects of ourselves to learn that these aspects also are parts of ourselves and need to be acknowledged for us to become whole. But beginning sometime next year, 2013, the biblical expression "you reap what you sow" should be quite adequate. We will gradually get more time to reflect and gain the full abilities from what we learned during the nanosecond. And remember, the global elite, and those who run them, have also had a hard time keeping everything and everybody under control while time has been running away from them. Hence, you have seen them making more mistakes, and every week, every month, their crimes are being revealed in the media, and their dirty laundry hung out in the open. Those at the top have had to sacrifice more and more of their minions, there is that word again, in order to stay hidden. They know their control system is not sustainable, and they are working hard to find a better one. In the meantime, we have time to act and reap what we have sown in order to tip them over. So far, we have learned a lot about the Sirians, how they think and act, their mentality, their history, and much more. We feel quite familiar with their personalities. Again, however, I want to stress that there are most probably Sirians who are good people as well, but we don't see much of them here in our subsector of the galaxy. Those who are directly connected to Earth have shown a very harsh attitude and have treated us no better than we treat our cattle. If that was the reason, that they think we are cattle, and they do, it would be bad enough, but we have also learned that they have a greater motif, which is to conquer not only the 4% universe, but the 96% as well. They are not alone on their mission, however. They have other star races assisting them, and we are now going to look a little bit deeper into whom these star races are, and also if there are any species, entities, or otherwise who are benevolent and willing to assist us. If so, who are they? 2. The Sirian Alliance. I started talking about the Sirian Alliance in the paper before this one, in Genesis paper number 8, in the hands of interdimensional star beings, but didn't define them very thoroughly. First we need to distinguish between the Sirian Alliance and the Sirian Empire, which are two different things. The Sirian Empire consists of all the planets and star systems the Sirian overlords have managed to conquer, not only in this sector of the universe, but in other sectors and galaxies as well. They are the totality of star systems belonging to the Sirians. Their headquarters is the Sirian star system, approximately 8.7 light-years from Earth. The Sirian Alliance are the star races who have joined the Sirians on their mission to conquer the 4% and the 96%. The Alliance consists of the Sirian Empire and other star races as well, who are willing to accomplish this goal together with the Sirians, without necessarily belonging to the Sirian Empire. Planet Earth is one of many planets the Alliance is concentrating on at the moment, but one of their greater experiments, due to that Prince Ea put the fire of the goddess in the human soul, and from my understanding, we were the first group Ea experimented on in this way. The Mother Goddess in her physical manifestation, the Queen of the Stars, did the same thing on many other planets, prior to what her son Ea did here on Earth, but our planet was most probably the first world the Sirians and the Aryan Prince experimented with in this fashion. I am not familiar with all the star races who are rubbing shoulders with the Sirian overlords, but will mention a few here. The Alpha Draconians, after Sirius star system itself, Thuban, Alpha Draconis, seems to be the Sirians' most important base. It appears that this star was one of the first planetary systems the Dark Lords conquered. The inhabitants are different kinds of Draco/reptilian life forms, often giant in shape. These races are commonly mentioned in ufology and exopolitics as a cruel conquer race and deeply involved in Earth's history. This is very true to my knowledge as well, and the main group that is working closely with the Syrians here on Earth, especially within Lil. In the Sumerian scriptures, they go under a common name, Kingu or King. The Draconian Albinos. Although their home planets are now orbiting Thuban, their royal clan, who are an albino Draco race, some with wings and horns, others without any of it, migrated to the Lyran star system, possibly when the Syrians came, or perhaps before. They are larger than all other king, and are in Sumerian text known as the King Babar. They are creator gods in their own right and are the creators of other reptilian races, now spread out over Sector 9. The Babar are loners and opponents to the Syrians, although not directly human-friendly either. They are known to be aggressive and don't hesitate to kill, but don't have any direct plans to take over the universe, like the Syrian alliance does. They are present in our solar system on occasion, and the Syrians leave them alone, probably out of respect and fear. The Red Dracos. These are the ones in charge of the Draconians still residing in Draco. Most of the Dracos are these days willingly working with the Syrians, although there are rebel groups here too, as normally seems to be the case in occupied worlds. They have reddish skin, wings, horns, and tails. It's probably from seeing manifestations of this group we got the image of the devil. They are known to be ferocious soldiers, and often seen together with Syrians on occupied planets. They have their own governors in Thuban, but the whole Draco system falls under Syrian regime, and their governors answer to the Syrian government. The Green Dracos. These are the worker class, obedient to both the Red Dracos and the Syrians. They are considered a lower caste and simply do as they are told. They are not trained warriors like the Red, but they are still territorial, which is a common reptilian trait, and would get hostile if provoked, and definitely if they were ordered to. The Vegans. Most Vegans are not in alliance with the Syrians, but there is a rebel group here as well, who were manipulated into joining the Syrian group. The Vegans are otherwise very skilled creator gods, and have seeded many planets in this sector of the universe. It's an old race, probably one of the first in the Milky Way galaxy. On their home planet, they look similar to the Vulcans in Star Trek, and is probably where the idea to the Vulcans come from. Most Vegans are still residing in the Vega system and have nothing to do with this rebel group. The Andromedans. This is a little bit shadier, but it looks like there is a rebel group here too, who followed the Syrians on their mission and who now embrace the patriarchal movement. This rebel group would possibly be the group Alex Collier was in contact with. Normally, the group called the Andromedans are part of the Orion Empire and know that the universe is feminine. The reason I believe Collier's group is a rebel group belonging to the Syrian alliance is because they tell us that God is masculine. If they are Andromedans, they know better than that, but are playing the patriarch game together with the Syrians. There is also a chance that the Andromedans Alex was meeting could have been Syrians in disguise, showing themselves off as Andromedans. Therefore, I was a little reluctant to mention them here, but decided to do so with the above disclaimer. The Greys. Here is another shady group. The Greys as a species is apparently pretty common in the universe. LPGC call them Saurians, and author George Lobuono mentions them in his book, Alien Mind, as a very common template in the universe. Lobuono himself, however, was basically in contact with a hostile group he calls the Verdants, originating from a star system in a galaxy 14 million light-years away, but since then have spread out quite remarkably over this part of the universe, being on a mission of conquest and expansion. Many other researchers and contacts are describing the Greys as well. We know of a Grey group, which I discussed quite extensively in Level I, originating from Lyra, on a planet called Apex. This group was basically a friendly, benevolent race who minded their own business until the Verdants came and invaded them. The Apexian Greys were then, just like we humans on Earth, heavily genetically re-engineered and manipulated, until they became more of an android race. The story of the Apexian Greys can be read in detail in my Genesis paper number 1, Human Origins and the Living Library, but to make a long story short, due to a nuclear war, the planet Apex was not only thrown out of orbit, but also disappeared into a black hole and reappeared in a totally different star system, which we call Zeta Reticuli, many light years away from Vega. I got this pretty much confirmed by LPGC as well. Somewhere along the line, these greys were being invaded again, this time by the Sirians, and once again genetically manipulated. Eventually, they became foot soldiers and servants to the Sirians. These greys are not necessarily into conquering the universe, but are more like slaves to the wolf and/reptilian race. To make things even more complicated, it seems like human genetic engineers have picked up on how resilient the bodies of the original greys are, and have used their genetics to create a human/grey hybrid, whom people have seen here on Earth, particularly around military bases. It's quite evident that the Sirians have a hand in helping humans create this hybrid race, because they are often seen together with Sirians. Anonymous whistleblowers have said that the Greys who are created here on Earth are meant to be used mainly as astronauts for the shadow government, due to that their body template is the only one so far that they have found resilient or resistant enough to endure radiation and other obstacles in space that human bodies have been had a hard time with while space traveling, making it impossible for human bodies to stay in space for more than a short time. So the Grey situation is quite complex, and it's not obvious who is who. For us humans it is not of that much importance, however, because the ones seen in our solar system are not benevolent, and work either for our government, with the Sirian overlords, or both. We know that not all Greys are recently engineered human/grey hybrids, because the Greys were mentioned already in the Sumerian scriptures as the Maimanu, and have been seen on Earth by different cultures over the centuries. They are said to have lived underground, and the American Indians call them the Ant People. The Pleiadians. Again, we have a rebel group of Pleiadians who started working with the Sirians, or more specifically, Prince Ea. They are giants, often referred to as the Bird People and the Bulls, Taurus. We know from the Pleiadians first-hand, Marciniak's group, that they are giants. They hint at heights from 7 feet up to 300 feet. The Pleiadians also admit to being the fallen angels in the Bible, who came here to copulate with human females, but also helped Ea and Nin with enhancing the human genome, using Pleiadian DNA. This resulted in the biblical giants, who roamed the earth around the time of Noah and before, the Nephilim. Some of them survived the deluge, as well, and became the Rephaim. Although these giants may be extinct today, their creators, the Pleiadian rebel group, are still working with the Sirians. According to themselves, they did not evolve in the Pleiades, but came there much later. The Pleiadian group which has been involved in Earth history originated in Lyra, only to later migrate to Ursa Major, and finally ended up in the Pleiades, on the planet Dooku in the Maya star system in particular, but also on a planet around the blue star, Electra. The Ashta command. There are websites on the internet where they say they are channeling the Ashta command. This group of ETS are simply the Pleiadians in present time, who are manipulating the channeler into thinking they are ascended masters coming down to help us in our struggle. We see a lot of this kind of channeling today, and I ask the reader to be very selective with whom you associate with when comes to alien species. There are certainly good ETS out there who wish us well, but if they contact us, they all have one thing in common: they tell us that we are our own saviors and should not expect any alien race coming down to Earth and do the job for us. We need to break the God spell and claim our sovereignty as biological and spiritual beings, and this is exactly the message a good intended alien species would have. They can't wake us up for us. And if they would come down today and tell us they were here to guide us and tell us what to do, it's going to be another human/God relationship, or they would most likely be attacked by the PTB, who would successfully manipulate many of the citizens into thinking these ETS are here to invade. The gargoyles. We see them everywhere on the top of old churches and cathedrals and is a typical Catholic symbol. Statues of them can also be seen elsewhere, often guarding entrances to sacred or mysterious sites. People often think that they are made up in someone's imagination, but we know that is rarely the case, almost without exceptions, statues and artifacts of strange and mysterious creatures have bases in reality. In the Sumerian scriptures, these gargoyles were sometimes called mugur, which means furious reptile, Pazuzu in Assyrian, and were winged dragons with horns and tails, looking quite threatening in their appearance. Like so many others of the star races of the Sirian alliance, the gargoyles, too, originate in Lyra, and a second race was genetically engineered on Doku and the Pleiades at a later time. There may be more star races in the Sirian alliance, but these are the ones I am aware of. If the reader knows of more, feel free to email me, email address on the contact page of my website. Please also include a reference, or references, to where you found the information. 3. The Allies of Mankind. In my papers, Level I and Level 2, I have mentioned the allies of mankind in different places, on different occasions. Some readers have, over time, emailed me and told me I ought to spend more time on the good star races than the bad ones and concentrate more on the positive, or will get even more of the negative. They conclude that this is exactly what the bad forces want, people focusing on them so they can get even more powerful. I understand where these people come from, and from one one-dimensional perspective, they are correct. Still, I am concentrating a lot on the positive sides as well in my solution sections. But the most important reason I am focusing so much on the negative ETS compared to the positive forces is that before we can do something constructive about our situation, we need to know what the situation is. We can sit and meditate and do all the right things and think we are immune to all the negative, but all we do is to sweep it under the carpet. If we are not aware of what's going on, we are more than likely going to continue doing things that have kept us trapped for millennia without even knowing we're doing them. The only way out of this is to educate ourselves and at the same time concentrate on the positive. Not everybody needs to do what I do and write papers or books, but we need to do both, educate ourselves and think positive. Because if we don't understand the mechanics behind what's going on, we won't be able to break the chains. When we talk about star races, we mostly hear about the negative ETS, because they are the ones who create trouble for us. So it's natural that these species get the most attention. The ones who mean us well and are 100% on our side don't land here and mingle with humans, at least not on a regular basis. Sometimes they come down and show themselves, but when doing so, they normally contact individual humans or small groups, and they do not interfere with our matters. The blue beings, Barbara Marciniak, for example, was contacted by the blue beings in the late 1970s, saying they were from the Pleiades. They later on became the Pleiadians, the same group Marciniak is still channeling today. This group consists of a number of beings from different star races who have come together as onto energetics to spread their message in an effort to help themselves and mankind. One of these Pleiadian groups is the blue beings. They came here as non-physicals and let their avatars manifest themselves to Barbara as the blue beings they apparently are on their home planet in the Pleiades. I consider the Pleiadians whom Marciniak is channeling being good ETs, although I know they wouldn't even be here, or bother with us, if it wasn't because they first of all are attempting to help themselves, and us second. However, it has shown that their mission, agenda, has been quite beneficial for us too, and over time I notice that they have really come to like us humans. Yes, I can tell from have listened to them quite a lot, and some of my own material is inspired from what they have taught me. So, in spite of that they have their own motives, I consider them being allies of mankind. They are the descendants of the fallen angels in the Bible, and the Pleiades today and in the future, where they come from, are quite tumultuous places, with civil wars and inner conflicts. The Marciniak group, however, is a rebel group who meet somewhere in secret and in the non-physical to do this specific and unique channeling. They want an end to the tyranny that runs the Pleiades in the future. The Aryans, the Orion Empire is huge from what I have found out, and is in general a pretty peaceful place today, although it had its tumultuous times as well in the ancient past. We humans, in our original form, I consider originate from Orion, due to that most of the Mother Goddess helpers when came to seeding Earth were from the Orion Empire, although some of the founders were from other places as well. What they all had in common, however, was that they acknowledged the feminine force in the universe as being the original creative force, in Sumerian called the Niyama, and they were working with the goddess moral and ethical values in mind. Today, the Aryans are very much aware of what is happening here on Earth. As recent as perhaps 8 months ago, I was asking myself that if the Aryans, who originally owned this planet, feel the Earth has been hijacked, why don't they come here and liberate us from the Syrian alliance? It seems like they could quite easily do so if they really put their energy to it. The answer, once it occurred to me, was quite obvious. If the Aryans would interfere, we humans, in our ignorance, would see them as an invader force, just like we would the Syrians. And if the Aryans came, the Syrians would definitely play the victims and plead for help from mankind, just to get us on their side. So it wouldn't be a good solutions. Secondly, they know better than start another galactic war. They've been there, done that. Instead, they are monitoring us closely, ready to assist when they can. In fact, all we need to do is to get together as a human race and ask for help, and help would come. But first we would have to know for a fact who is the enemy and who the friend is. If we are confused about that, we would be confused when the Syrians manipulate us into believing they are the good guys. Keep in mind, however, that the Aryan Empire is extensive, and there are of course beings who consider themselves being Aryans, who are not here in our best interest. These are few in numbers, but are creating some problem in the astral, from what I have heard. I bring this up, because it proves the point that things are not black and white, and there are good and bad beings within all star races. The Amarg, these are female founders, originating from the star Dubhe in Ursa Major, the Big Dipper. They are a subgroup to the Amotum, and have been residing in our solar system since ancient times. They used to have their base on old Terra's moon, and when Terra was split into two during the Titan War, there are researchers who claim that Terra's moon at that time was slung out of its orbit around Terra and became the planet Venus. The Amarg may still dwell on Venus, but most certainly as onto energetics. They have always had affection for mankind and the whole living library, and were allegedly more involved in the old history of Terra/Earth than I have had time to acknowledge here in these papers. The Amotum, this is another name which seems to appear in the Sumerian texts quite a lot. According to Anton Parks, the Amotum are female life designers, founders, living in higher dimensions, of the Khaa, but can visit ours with no problem. They have been said to originate both from Orion, Ursa Major, and Ursa Minor. It is my own understanding that all the 3 star systems are correct. The Amotum is simply a generic term for female life designers in a highly evolved state of being. Many of these female founders are overseeing the progress we're making here on Earth. The onto energetics, this is quite a general term that includes all non-physicals, although I am here concentrating on those who are present in the astral realms around Earth and are studying what is happening, especially now, during the nanosecond. Most of them are benevolent, evolved beings, who are happy to help if we ask them. If they are benevolent, they will not do the job for us, but rather help us steering ourselves onto the right track. This goes for all the benevolent races and beings out there, Pleiadians, Aryans, Amotum, Amarg, and other physical and non-physical beings. None of them will help or interfere, unless we ask them. Most of them are more than willing to help. Spirit guides, angels, this is another shady term, because it can have so many meanings. I am not very keen on many of the spirit guides who come and get you after you have departed from your body at body death. Most of them are Syrian helpers, such as non-physical Vegans and Greys. Be particularly on your guard if they tell you to follow them into the light or to the tunnel, or go see relatives. If you choose to go with them, you will end up in the Syrian recycling system again with full amnesia, and then being shot down into a new body here on Earth. If you read this and have enjoyed my papers so far, you are probably not a person who wants to go into the light. In one of the last papers, if not the last paper, in Level 2, I will talk more about what the alternatives may be. The deceptive spirit guides may manifest themselves in the astral as angels, relatives, friends, a pleasant being, or perhaps even as Jesus or one of his disciples if the person is Christian. The benevolent spirit guides are usually either higher version of yourself, or soul fragments of yourself that have already made it back to the oversoul and are now meeting themselves in form of you, ready to take you home when you die and are in a higher state of consciousness and awareness. They may manifest very similar to the false spirit guides, but if you use the abilities you have developed here on earth during this, and a few previous lifetimes, you will be able to tell who is who. And if you're uncertain, ask them who they are. Another obvious distinction is of course, where will they lead you? Above the grid and out in the universe, or into the light/tunnel. A good thing to do when you're on your deathbed is to imagine yourself being where you want to be and ask for help only by those who have your absolute best interests in mind. But don't hesitate to ask for guidance when you die. If your death is sudden and unexpected, and you suddenly find yourself disconnected from your body, go ahead and imagine it right there and then, and again, don't hesitate to ask for assistance, but only from those who have your best interests in mind. This, of course, is very important. The benevolent spirit guides, however, are not there to help you only when you're on your deathbed, but any time in your daily life, as well. Ask and you shall receive. Again, your guides will most probably not do the work for you, but guide you in the right direction by letting you experience what you need to experience. After all, we call them guides, don't we? The Oversoul is the real you, from whom you in your current incarnation is only a soul fragment. The problem is that due to that the Syrians have kept us in custody here on Earth. We've been disconnected from our Oversoul by their recycling system, reincarnation. Instead of returning to the Oversoul after a lifetime is over and report back to her, we are manipulated into going through the tunnel and into the light. So we hardly ever connect with our real selves, but instead reincarnate over and over. Each soul fragment learns a lot, although she is forced to forget when the Syrians erase our memories between lives, perhaps not in one lifetime, but by incarnating over and over. If one particular soul fragment, you in your current incarnation in this example, would remember all her lifetimes, she would be rich of experiences. However, now when we are going through their amnesia implant station, we have to start relearning what we've already learned in previous lifetimes every time we reincarnate. It's a waste of time from our perspective. From the Syrian perspective it is not, of course. However, if a single one of all the soul fragments that are you, simultaneously incarnated on Earth, would report back to the Oversoul, having full memory recall, that would be a lot of knowledge. Then think of yourself as being one of perhaps thousands of soul fragments, all incarnated here on Earth at the same time, but in different time periods, and you can start imagining how much you really know and can bring with you out in cosmos to meet other friendly star beings. Although they have been able to experience most dimensions for a long time, these star beings may have a lot to learn from you. That's why so many star beings who don't have a physical body would do anything to have one now in the nanosecond, when the learning curve is incredibly high. Still, even if these onto energetics would take a body now in the nanosecond, for the first time, it wouldn't be the same, because we humans have past experiences down here which the non-physicals lack. But they know that even by incarnating once here on Earth, if it is now in the nanosecond, it's way better than nothing. Hence, from one perspective, we are lucky to be here at this time. But only if we take advantage of the nanosecond and act like sponges, willing to take in and learn as much as we can. After 2012, time will slow down incrementally, and the time window of great learning closes. That's when it's time to reflect over what we've learned in a great haste. If we didn't learn much and spent most time in front of the television, there is not much to reflect over, either, of course. However, if you read this, you probably already have a lot to reflect over, whether it's this material or other things you've learned before you read this. This is what the Mayans called the end times, because it's the end of a cycle of 26,000 years, one circle around the zodiac, and the beginning of a new. The timelines are merging, and we are saying hello to our other incarnations. Time as we know it is collapsing, and we are remembering our multidimensionality. Our previous lifetimes are being revealed for us, often both in the awake state and in dream state, but especially in dream state, 4 cycles per second or less. Many of us have learned a lot only over the last 10 years or so, and we are not going to fall into the recycling trap again. If none of your other soul fragments have managed to return to your oversoul, you will be the first, which is perfectly okay. If this is the case, you will be your own spirit guide for your other incarnations to follow, no matter in what time frame they live. Some may live in the 1800s, others 2500 BC, and others may even live in the future. It doesn't matter, because time is per default not linear. We made it linear together with the Syrians. It's an agreement, set in a state of manipulation, but still an agreement. When you die next time, you would probably want to return to your oversoul and then again come back, this time in the non-physical, as a spirit guide, and pick up your other selves when they die, one by one. Then, when you've picked up the last one, you are whole. There is no soul of yours left on earth, and you are one big oversoul, ready for new adventures. You can choose to go elsewhere in the universe and explore the dimensions, or you may come back to Earth and rebuild a new planet, which eventually will be free from the oppression of the Syrians. This is what will become the new Earth, where those who took advantage of the nanosecond and still want to come back, will build a world of a much higher vibration where there eventually is no place for the lower Syrian energies. Like I've said before, the multiverse is fluid, and you build your own reality with your own thoughts. Others with similar thoughts will share your version of the multiverse, others will live in their own versions. There is no end to it. In some versions, the Syrians will still exist, creating a machine world where they have total control over the masses, who will be more and more like androids, robots, and machines. There is probably a majority of today's population who will choose this version, either out of ignorance or out of fear, and it is their choice. We can only inform, it's for each and every one to make their choice, it's none of our business, and not for us to force any reality on anybody. If you die and can't find your oversoul for any given reason, don't worry about it. There are still forces who can help, see above how to ask for help, and / or you just imagine a place where you want to go, and you'll be there. So you see how important it is to have an exit plan. If no oversoul is present, start building one right there and then. Do exactly the same thing as you would do if you would have found one, be your own spirit guide and start collecting and merging with your other selves who are still down here, living their lives. When all those soul fragments are collected, you will be whole, and your own oversoul, able to do exactly the same thing as the person who found their oversoul. So both ways work, which is important to understand. These are the major helpers of the benevolent kind. There are of course other star races as well who are on our side in this drama whom I have not mentioned here, but the ones I did mention are the ones I put the most attention towards, and in my opinion the most significant one. However, when you ask for help and assistance in general or in specific matters, you don't necessarily have to ask a certain group for help. All you need to do is to ask for assistance in general, just keeping in mind that you need to add that you only want help from those who have your best interests in mind. I can't emphasize that enough, but as long as you do that, you will be fine.